The recipe today is a 40 bucket, in this case a 20 litre bucket, 40 of these total of ingredients. That breaks down as 10% high nitrogen, 30% greens and 60% carbon. This is what it looks like. So I have 4 buckets of cow manure here today. As I said, that could be a mixture. It could be horse manure, donkey manure, it could be sheep, it could be whatever you have. It could be a big bunch of legumes. It could be all buckets of seed, provided you've hydrated. So for today, that's my 10% for 20 litre buckets of high nitrogen. My greens are vegetable waste. 30% equates with 12 20 litre buckets. So you work out your green component based on what you have. Like I have a lot of fresh grass. I could use all fresh grass. Now don't just go with grass. Use your weeds. If you have dandelions, when you weed your garden, use those in your compost pile. So leave your weed into the day before you make your compost pile. All of those weeds will bring something different to the pile. Predominantly what they'll be bringing is nitrogen, but different weeds pull different minerals out of the ground. They store those minerals in their body, and as that weed dies back, or in this case as it decomposes in the compost pile, it is releasing that compound. So it could be nitrogen, it could be magnesium, it could be calcium. So every weed has a value. You'll never look at weeds as a nuisance again. They are a good, and believe me, everyone has access to weeds. So you can have 12 buckets of weeds if that's what you have. Leave the roots on them, leave some of the soil on them. You're bringing microbes. So what I have is broccoli, cauliflower, there are some potatoes, there's some bananas, there's some pineapple, skin. I used apples in a previous pile. So whatever you have in excess of, or whatever you have access to. I'm using all fresh greens. This looks brown. We'd all immediately say, oh, that's carbon. It's not. These are coffee grinds. I collect this waste material from a restaurant in town, Wilder and Gold. Thank you very much. It's a green coffee. When it's harvested, coffee is green. It turns brown because it's roasted. But it was captured, it was harvested green, and it was preserved in a green state. So coffee grinds are nitrogen. They are your green component. So for today, I am using 5 buckets of chopped vegetable waste. Go through it like that. Turn the direction of the face of the shovel, and you're getting it broken. I'm using 5 buckets of fresh cut grass. I'm going to use 2 buckets of coffee grinds. The final component in our compost pile today is carbon. So 24 buckets, 24 20 litre buckets equals 60% carbon. Most of my carbon input here on this farm is wood chip, because that's what I have a lot of. Straw is carbon. Older hay, or hay that was cut late in the season, hay that was left standing too long, will be more going to the carbon end. It mightn't be as high in carbon as wood chip. But if you were using hay as a green and you didn't get the continuation of temperature in your pile, that's probably your culprit there. So for today, I know that that's old hay. I know that that was harvested late in the season. So I'm putting 1 bucket of that in for variety and biodiversity in my compost pile. I'm using 2 buckets of cardboard, again used as breeding chambers. I'm using 2 buckets of hydrated wood chip. I'm using 1 bucket of forest floor, which is a mix of dried leaf and some of the waste material in the forest floor. And to finish this off, I'm adding from a previous compost pile that I made, which is a biocomplete compost pile. So this contains all the nutrients, and I'm adding in a couple of fistfuls of that as an inoculum into the pile. Some of the weeds that I put in as part of the green will release calcium into the pile, but to ensure a calcium uplift in the pile, gather all your dried eggshells. Mash them up. Now you can run them to a blender and turn it into powder. I haven't done that. I haven't done it in my previous pile, and no eggshells are left normally at the end. So just pulverize it with a bit of timber and add that to your pile, roughly about 1 kg for a pile this size. whatever remaining buckets I require as my carbon input, I'm going to count those out now, and that will make this pile. So that is not a waste product. What we have here now is 18 buckets of carbon, even though that contains, as you can see here, some unbroken down cow manure from the previous high nitrogen input, and that will be now nitrogen, we'll say. I'm using this as carbon, 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 greens and high nitrogen. So I'm going to make a baseline with some of this. Because it's 40% moisture, I'm going to start my base with this. 40% moisture, any excess moisture that will drain down through, this will take it up. And then any extra will run off. I tend to do a mix simply because I think it helps the process. So again, chopped, because grass as well, I noticed grass and weeds tend to, in the early stages, they can mat, and you don't want that. Now I'm adding some structure. What I like about the wood chip is it keeps it more aerobic, because it keeps the pores larger, and it gives space for air to diffuse. Now, my own little trick that I'm doing. This is hot water I brought out earlier, so she's still warm to touch. Is that your way?
Yeah, just a wee bit, but it's okay. There's something in it. I thought it was empty, so.
What?
It's grand. That's grand.
So here is my nice cow manure, and again, so that just to speed up the process, I just liquefy it a bit more. Now I know that all my other ingredients are dry, and in this case the bulk of my carbon is only at about 40%, so I have an extra bit of wriggle room there in terms of added moisture. And any excess you'll see it drain off. And when you see it draining off, you know, just put your fork in under the bottom of your pile and just kind of aerate a little bit. I'm not talking about turning it now, just talking about giving it a bit of an uplift. By the way, the smell is delicious. Now I do it in stages, simply because it's easier than doing it by hand. And it's a great workout. And I don't want to be absolutely buggered by the end of it. So we're going again. And if you come across anything like that now, that's cow muck that has formed kind of a lump from earlier. Break it up. Because remember, you're trying to keep this aerobic. going to add in, I have one more bucket to fill of my coffee grinds. And that's also, when you don't have 40 buckets, you need to set up, count, you know, fill the buckets so that you can keep an accurate count of what you're doing. Now you can see here from this being chopped up, you can see that there is moisture present. And that is moisture that will be used by the bacteria, and that's moisture that will come into your pile. You can see that it's not so important in our climate to be hydrating everything 24 hours beforehand. But remember, 50% is your magic number. Anything higher, if you're up at 70%, then you're looking at possibly going anaerobic. That's what we're trying to avoid. So again, it's a bit like making a cake. And remember, you're not eating this, but your soil microbes are. So make it a good one. And besides monitoring your temperature, you're going to monitor your moisture levels as well. As she cools down after your 3 turns, your temperature will start to come back from your thermophilic phase, and that's okay. Once you've distributed all of your pile through the thermophilic, the hot phase, you can then just leave her sit. You've done your 3 turns, you've got your temperature up into the thermophilic range every time, then you are going to let her sit. After your 2nd turn, now, when I finish, I always cover with the tarp. Even though there's no rain getting in here, I cover it because I find that helps hold the moisture, especially if the ambient temperatures are high, and stops the pile drying out. I don't seal it. I literally just sit it over the top. Now, because it's evening time, it's still warm, but I have persistently used an old heavy single quilt through the process, to be honest. I have never gone above 66 degrees I went to. Now, my mentor in the soil food web has impressed upon me that the sweet spot is 55 to 65 degrees centigrade. In that, you're going to kill most pathogens. There are some pathogens, I think brucellosis survives above that. But if you go above 70 degrees, so even between 65 degrees and 70 degrees centigrade, you are killing pathogens, but at that point you're also killing your beneficials. So your sweet spot to aim for is 55 to 65 degrees. Obviously try and bring it up towards the 65. You can maintain her at that for a number of days and then turn her. What you don't want is that she starts to fall, because then you're coming from a minus. So if you get her up to 65, now it'll take a few days depending on your temperatures. So you monitor it constantly. So we'll say you take 8 o'clock in the morning, you take your first reading. So you do a little notebook. I'm sure for those of us more organised than me, you can put something up on your computer, but then you have to go in and input, and believe me, you will forget. So for that pile there, you do a date, time, temp and moisture. That's what you're recording. So you try and do your temperature check maybe 10 hours, 12 hours apart. So I normally start in the morning, like that was started in the evening now. So I would start at 7 o'clock was at 40 degrees. By 8 o'clock in the morning it was 55 degrees. By 8 o'clock that evening it was gone to 60 degrees. So, now those are Fahrenheit by the way. Did I do one with centigrade? Yes, here we are. So 8 a.m. in the morning, 22 degrees. By 9 p.m. that evening she was 31 degrees centigrade. By the next day she was at 47. The next night she was at 50. So you're recording the date, 2 readings a day, your temperature and your moisture. If you're having zero uplift, your high nitrogen wasn't high nitrogen. So normally I think it has taken me about 3 days to come up to temperature, and then you're kind of monitoring it then to hold that temperature.